This Medicine Hat regular City Council meeting of June 19th, 2023 is called to order at 6:30 p.m. We will begin tonight with a moment of prayer or reflection. I'll now read the city's land acknowledgement. The City of Medicine Hat acknowledges that we live and work on treaty territory. The city pays respect to all Indigenous peoples and honors their past, present, and future. We recognize and respect their cultural heritages and relationships to the land. Moving on to councillor announcements. Councillor Dubinowski, you have a councillor announcement tonight.
Well, Your Worship, it's small but important. I actually was inspired by a column that Mr. Glant wrote in the paper in earlier this month, indicating he does a 100 years ago column, which I always find fascinating. There was an indication in there that on June 27th, 1923, City Council had approved a civic holiday to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the founding of Medicine Hat. And so looking forward, we don't really in our tradition reflect on founding so much, but those of us who have been raised in Medicine Hat or moved to Medicine Hat, I think would find it interesting to know that we are celebrating 140 years of being founded pretty quick. The date is uncertain. I did ask if we could identify the date, but it is sometime in June. But I just thought from a historical context, since we celebrate heritage in Medicine Hat and heritage resources, we should celebrate and reflect on the founding of Medicine Hat, 140 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other councillor announcements? Seeing none, we'll move on to adoption of the agenda. Are there any objections or additions to the adoption or the agenda as presented? Seeing none, council adopts the agenda as presented. Next up are the adoption of the minutes of the regular meeting of City Council dated June 5th, 2023. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, council adopts the minutes of the June 5th, 2023 City Council meeting minutes as, sorry, I said that twice, as presented. We now have two presentations coming up at Section 8. First up, we have Paul Carolyn, Chief Executive Officer of Halo Air Ambulance, and it is a request for funding. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, members of Council, and City Administration. My name is Paul Carolyn. I am the Chief Executive Officer for Halo Air Ambulance. On behalf of our team and our Board of Directors, I want to thank you for the opportunity to share the Halo story. On the afternoon of August 4th, 2001, Dr. Ivan Witt and his family were traveling on Highway 41 South. They were involved in an accident and Dr. Witt tragically died at scene. Dr. Witt's death set forth in motion to create a local helicopter air ambulance program. Even though we wouldn't fly our first mission for another 6 years, the outrage in the community that there wasn't a program close enough to make a difference in Dr. Witt's accident was the inspiration for the HALO program. Since 2007, HALO has been responding to calls for service across Southern Alberta. Driven by passion and powered by purpose, HALO has responded to thousands of life-saving calls, impacting countless lives. Support for HALO aligns with a variety of the current priorities listed in the City of Medicine Hat's strategic plan, not the least of which is take action for the betterment of our city. We should celebrate and be incredibly proud that HALO is based in our city. We are one of only 5 municipalities in the province with a helicopter program and one of only 3 outside the Metro core. This is your chance to act and join HALO in making life better in and around Medicine Hat. HALO Air Ambulance has been committed to Medicine Hat for over 16 years. Our base of operations is strategically and intentionally based at the Medicine Hat Regional Airport. This model allows us to provide comprehensive helicopter emergency medical services across our response area while simultaneously being available to respond to public safety emergencies within the city. Over the past 16 years, Halo has contributed over $21 million to the local economy, supporting hundreds of local businesses, attracting and employing talented professionals, and contributing incalculable social impact contributions to the community. With a proven track record of prudent financial fitness and recent enhancements in program delivery and governance, now is the right time for the City of Medicine Hat to invest in the HALO program. We are inviting you to join the already established public-private funding model and become a HALO ambulance strategic partner by providing $2.5 million over 5 years. Some people have the perception that because they live in the city, they don't need HALO. A HALO helicopter isn't likely to land in your backyard, and while that is probably true, the reality couldn't be more opposite. We all leave the city for travel, recreation, and work. That alone is enough to justify the investment, but that is only part of the story, because the reality is HALO does operate in the city. Did you know that during a recent flood event, HALO had a landing zone at the Family Leisure Center alongside an ad hoc urgent care center in case someone needed to be transported to the hospital in the event the bridges were closed? Did you know that 11 years ago, HALO searched for 5 days straight when Amy Lewis went missing, plus another 5 times when new evidence came to light? Did you know that along with BADIS, HALO searched the river for 3 days in 2017 when a young man went missing in the South Saskatchewan River near Equidale? And did you know more recently, HALO supported the Medicine Hat Fire Department in a search for a man that drowned in the river not far from City Hall? Did you know that our flight crews believed they spotted that victim and were able to talk fire department resources onto the scene? Did you know that in 2022, a total of 19% of our calls for service came from the City of Medicine Hat? My presentation would normally include compelling evidence-based information before leaving you with an emotional calling to action. We have a high-quality video. Many of you have seen it. It was produced locally by Stir Stick Productions that even after watching dozens of times myself still makes me sob. But a 5-minute presentation doesn't allow enough time for that video, so I will wrap up with this. At our core, we have fundamental opposing philosophies, and one of the beautiful things about HALO is how we make them both strengths. The first is strict fiscal prudence. We are incredibly frugal and make every dollar count. In fact, there's an internal urban legend at HALO that a board member once suggested that we should cut promotional color-changing pencils in half, because then we would have twice as many. Trust me, I understand as well as anyone, you have to answer for every dollar you spend. So do we. The second philosophy is a simple one. You can't put a price on someone's life. So for the 4 people from Medicine Hat that we transported from the Cypress Hills after serious mountain bike accidents over the course of a week, that particular trail is now known as the HALO Express. Or the 17-year-old suicidal girl from Medicine Hat we found with the assistance of search and rescue and the police service on an approach on Highway 41 North. Or the pregnant first-time mom who needed urgent transport from the Medicine Hat Regional Hospital to save her baby. Or the 3-year-old who stopped breathing and turned blue before we picked him up and got him to the help he needed. Or to the well-known corporate executive from Medicine Hat who shares his daughter's HALO story. And they said to me, "We need your permission to send your daughter, but she needs to go to Calgary now. There are doctors there waiting for her to perform life-saving surgery, and she could potentially die while she's in the air going to Calgary." I have no doubt that if she was in the back of a ground ambulance, we wouldn't have been having that discussion. We would have been planning a funeral. I asked Aaron after that mission if there was anything else we could do for his family, and he replied, "Paul, we don't need anything else from you. We just need to make sure you're there to save the next life." For all of them, and countless more, this investment is the right thing to do. And I guarantee you this, if it was someone you loved, it wouldn't matter the cost. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Knodel?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Through the chair to Mr. Carolan. So would the request that you have on the table tonight allow you to support your existing programming, or would there be programming changes as a result of the increased funding that you're looking for?
Through the chair, Councillor Knodel, thank you for that question. I think that I would open with, Halo has a long history of service, but we have never deficit spend. And so there are program enhancements that we have always talked about that are in consideration and that have planning steps in place. These types of investments make those types of things possible. Halo runs a program where we run an operational budget, and then we have to raise every single dollar to make it happen. So for instance, I was at a golf tournament last week in Lethbridge, and it was brutally hot, and we don't have a Halo branded tent. Well, now I really want one. So when we raise enough money, we'll buy it. So the additional funding helps us develop program enhancements that we've been looking at for some time. Those enhancements are extensive, but we need to do a bit more deliberate planning as far as the budget is concerned. Another anecdotal piece to Halo is that one of the stories we talk about a lot is that if they build it, they will come. Basically, if we got a helicopter, the funding would happen, both provincially, municipally, and from philanthropy. That didn't prove to be the case. We've worked our butts off. Our board of directors is incredibly dedicated, and they did it alone for a long time. And so the reason we continue to ask for these types of investments is so we can continue to provide a world-class service for many, many years to come.
Councillor Sharps?
Thank you, and through the chair. I was just looking at slide 42. I don't know if we can go to that one, Rondi, under the mission distribution. So when I look at those percentages, for example, the biggest percentage there is 39%, and I think Medicine Hat was 19 that you said. So these are the calls to the area, correct? Not the citizens involved.
Through the chair, Councillor Sharps, yes, absolutely. So those are calls directly within the city limits, whether that be interfacility transfers that originate at the Medicine Hat Regional Hospital, or whether that's a search and rescue call that originates with the Medicine Hat Police Service. We have no way of calculating the number of times we transport a city of Medicine Hat residents from Elkwater. I happen to know that those 4 mountain bikers were from the city. I happen to know that that's an incredibly large tourist draw. However, because of Freedom of Information and Health Privacy Act, we don't get the demographics of where someone is from. So we're unable to provide that level of detail for you as far as when you consider the impact of the investment.
Thank you. Meg, I appreciate that. And I think when we were talking earlier, I recognize that that isn't the accurate numbers that are on here. I know 2 years ago, I had several staff driving out to Tabor for work, and about 4 years ago, and it was a horrific accident, and it was 6 people. So I know for a fact every one of them lived in Medicine Hat. I lost 3 of them. So I value your service, and I've been impacted by your service. So I just wanted to make sure when people are looking at this presentation, they're not swayed by that 19%, because it's actually not accurate. Sorry.
Thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Dumanowski?
Your Worship, Mr. Caroline, first of all, thank you for your presentation. Goes without saying, your board of directors and you, as you indicated, you worked your butts off. Well said. You continue to grow, expand, and develop the program over the years. In 16 years, it's hard to believe it's gone that quickly. Maybe not so quickly for you, but so I don't want to. I want to begin by paying homage to the work that you guys have done and the dedication you have to your calling. I just want to understand, because I know in some of it's probably buried in the stats that quickly went by, but for the average person, and certainly over the years I've heard the confusion between, and I want to get into a big thing here, but the confusion between the funding you receive or you don't receive, or recently are now acquiring through Alberta Health Services to offset your revenue stream versus what happened prior to that initiation, and that of STARS. And I guess the biggest frustration I often hear is that to people's thought anyway, STARS is fully funded, but Halo is not, or STARS, we have a second tier system of response because we live in a quadrant of the province that doesn't have the same population density as others. But can you just speak to that briefly? And then maybe while you're speaking to that, what I'm curious about is what percentage relationship does Alberta Health Services contribute to your revenue model? And if you understand, or I'm sure you've looked at or have come to appreciate what STARS revenue offset is from the same provider, which is Alberta Health Services.
Through the chair, Councillor Dubanowski, thank you for that question. So yes, there has been a disproportionate level of funding to STARS in the past. The announcement in March of 30th of 2022 basically leveled the playing field. All three operators, Halo, Hero, and STARS, were eligible to receive up to 50% of their total operating budget. STARS' overall budget is incredibly high. They have 24/7 operations. They have their own paramedics and clinical physicians, and they have an entire dispatch system that runs that. And so they're currently running at somewhere around between $11 and $13 million per base. They have 3 bases in Alberta, and so they will get somewhere between $21 and $24 million from the government of Alberta at that approximate 50% value. Prior to the announcement on March 30th, 2022, Halo received a fee for service. So while we were dedicated and only available for public safety emergencies and helicopter emergency medical services through Alberta Health Services, we had no other revenue streams. And so that fee for service resulted in approximately 6% of our total entire operating budget. We now are eligible, like STARS and Hero, to negotiate up to 50%. In 2022, our budget was $3 million, and we were able to get Alberta Health Services to 1.3 in total funding, representing 43% of our 2022 budget. That one-year term agreement has been extended while we work out the long-term agreement that ends in 2027. If we do not get an increase, that will drop to 37%. Our budget today is $3.5 million. In addition to those fee-for-service models, we also received a single restricted one-time grant in 2018 for $1 million to assist with the transition to a twin-engine program. If you remember, Halo was a single-engine helicopter for the first 12 years. While that helicopter flew 550 life-saving missions and certainly hit well above its weight class, it was a rescue helicopter modified into an air ambulance role. It was very limited in high winds and high temperatures. It was single engine. And while we had an exception to land at the Medicine Hat helipad on top of the hospital with that aircraft, we would have never gotten one for Calgary. And so that was why moving to a twin engine program was so valuable. We saw a significant increase in costs, which is why the efforts were doubled to get Alberta Health Services on board once and for all. So the plan is to get them to the full 50% as we continue to negotiate the remaining 4 years of that 5-year commitment.
Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, through the chair. Welcome, Paul, and wonderful presentation. I am a believer, supporter, and everything of Halo. Like Councillor Sharps, many of us have known someone or someone that has been touched by your service or needed to be touched by your service. So I just want to get some clarity for the people that are listening. So your request is 2.5 million over 5 years. So we're looking at 500,000 a year for a 5-year term. Just to clarify, when we talk about AHS giving 50%, is the province have an agreement with Halo, like annually? What do they support us with, or support you with?
Thank you. Through the chair, Councillor Hyder. So yes, so we have a contract with Alberta Health Services. It represented $1.3 million in 2022. Our fiscal year doesn't align with theirs. So their fiscal year is April 1st to March 31st. Ours is January 1st to December 31st. But for the grand scheme of the question, our program budget in 2022 was $3 million and we received 1.3, so 46 or 47%. So that is our current agreement. It was extended due to the election, and we expect to negotiate the remaining 4 years, or shortly less than 4 years, as soon as possible over the summertime. So our plan is to get them to at least 1.75, if not 2, but we're going to be, our projected budget is 3.5 million this year.
And just a quick follow-up. And the remainder of those dollars are private individuals, corporations, things like that. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So that's an important question, I think. So in our presentation, we didn't show this slide, but council has it. We talked about the distribution of our funding model. And HALO is represented on there, I think in 2022, of raising 20% of our entire budget. But that's direct HALO fundraisers. Those are fundraisers that we plan and execute in order to raise and contribute our part. But if you look at everything except Alberta Health Services, all of that is generated by the work that HALO does. So our relationship with regional municipalities, our relationship with corporations, our relationship with individuals, and our relationship with something we fondly call fundraisers for HALO generates the other 50%. And we have a proven track record of doing that for 16 years. Yes, there have been times when we've had to come to the community and say, we don't know where the next paycheck is coming from. But we have always found a way, and we always will.
Councillor Hirsch.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you, Paul, for the presentation. Obviously, HALO in Southern Alberta is very well known, and appreciate every effort that you and your Board of Governors, our Board of Directors do, and certainly the efforts that have been done in the history of HALO. And it's interesting being an observer of the evolution of HALO, and you know, request in front of us tonight to participate as a funder. I guess I just try to look in terms of getting involved, what does that look like? And I want to kind of go back in time a little bit to understand, you had some considerable tipping points. One was the upgrade of the helicopter to a twin motor for the night emissions, et cetera. Which has a material effect on your budget, right? I think did it almost double, or it did double?
It was 3 times as much.
3 times as
Yes,
much.
sir.
So I'm interested in the process of arriving on that decision, and if this council decided to become a funder and be essentially in it for the long haul, what mechanism do you have on future funding requests, direction of HALO, to some of the funders? Because as the ante, or as the budget expands, the ante, quite frankly, from a funding perspective, likely would go up. And I don't want to be in a position now where we're all in and then all of a sudden we go, hey, table stakes a little bit too high for us, I think we're out. Do you know what I mean? So help me understand what that looks like. What did you do in the past? What kind of things did you learn from that and maybe would implement in future as you move HALO forward?
Through the chair, Councillor Hirsch, thank you very much. Incredibly insightful question. So to answer your first point directly, the reason that we moved to a twin engine program was because we were told that if we didn't, we would never achieve provincial funding. We were dedicated to providing a world-class service in this area, had been since before our first mission on July 4th of 2007. We needed to grow the program, and the helicopter we fly today is commonly accepted as the industry best practice for helicopter emergency medical services and public safety programs. It works incredibly well in that role. While we did see a 3-time increase at that time in our overall budget, we also saw a 5-time increase in calls for service. And so that's because of a number of factors. Partially because the aircraft can accept missions safely in much more adverse conditions. Our temperature range is somewhere around -39 to +39, covers pretty much southern Alberta. We can accept missions in winds of up to almost 100 kilometers an hour, pretty much covers all of southern Alberta. And so it was an important step forward, but that step forward initiated a governance model change where we took things far more deliberately. There's something that I never want to get away from, and our board of directors is completely in support of this. We exist because good people saw a need and did something about it. That grassroots approach makes a huge difference, particularly when we're asking for funding, both at this level and from individuals. So we want to keep those incredibly important values while making sure that we have the governance structure in place to do things incredibly deliberately. This diversification in funding was actually driven by COVID. HALO was an organization that relied almost exclusively on in-person fundraising. We diversified our entire funding model to make sure that we could weather changes in government or changes in the economy. And we will continue to do that as we grow. Our board is dedicated to continuing the path towards a completely governance board, and they're well on their way to a policy board. They are looking at risk management and fund diversity and how we do things and program enhancements and making sure that we do them deliberately with a plan and not because if they build it, they will come. And so our entire structure has changed. The way we run our team has changed. We used to have one staff member, and if they left, all of a sudden the gas pedal came off and we coasted until we got someone back in that seat and up to speed and got them running again. And that had those spurts and stops had a big effect on our program. We now have 3 people. We have myself and we have 2 incredible staff that work in the office full time. So we have redundancy in place, but we're still doing it incredibly affordably and able to make sure that we can fundraise for the program. So we're dedicated to continuing to make those enhancements and continuing to build our team so that we can make sure that we can provide the service for years to come.
Councillor Robbins?
Thank you, and through the chair. I actually have a question about your business plan. I was a bit curious about one of the initiatives in it, and I'm hoping to maybe save you a trip back. But if you want to come back, you're more than welcome to. I'm looking actually at initiative number 3 in your business plan, which for those who don't have it in front of them, is establish a cardiac catheterization lab at the Medicine Hat Regional Hospital. And I'm not quite getting the connection to what you do in Halo, although maybe big picture, you can give me the big picture, why that's important. And so I'm just curious about why that particular initiative. The other ones I can see the connection, this one I'm not quite seeing it. And will you have a request for advocacy support from the City of Medicine Hat City Council for that initiative?
Through the chair, Councillor Robbins, thank you. So that cat may be out of the bag. There is a cardiac catheterization lab coming to Southern Alberta. Currently, it's slated for Lethbridge. That announcement happened after we put together our business plan. However, I don't think the ink is necessarily dry on that yet, so we'll continue to have those conversations. The reason, and the fact that it's in Lethbridge still supports the initiative, but the reason that was an important thing for us to advocate for provincially was this particular provincial government has a desire to expand rural healthcare. I don't know if you're aware, but there are 2 surgical suites at the Medicine Hat Hospital that are completely underutilized. And I've spoken with people at the hospital who know that if they had the equipment and the people, they could expand the ability to provide services in that area. The reason that a cardiac catheterization lab is incredibly important from a helicopter perspective is that in order to use that effectively, someone has to be diagnosed with needing cardiac catheterization and treated within 90 minutes. So the helicopter is an incredible asset when it comes to going out, getting someone and bringing them back and providing that ability for them to get that care. One of the things we talk about at Halo is we choose to live out here. We choose to live in Medicine Hat. I've been here since '95. I might as well have been born here now. It's an incredible city. I've had opportunity to leave and never have. But it shouldn't matter what our postal code is. We may not be able to have the best brain surgeon or a neonatal cardiac specialist at the Medicine Hat Hospital, but between the services we can have here and a helicopter that can get you to the ones you need, that's an important thing that we can offer the area. And so we advocated provincially for those types of initiatives. Obviously, they're incredibly selfish in some ways. They certainly support the Halo program and support a case for us to be funded the way that we want to be funded. As far as the relationship with City Council is concerned, absolutely. Our entire philosophy is relationship over revenue, but it's relationship over everything. So if we want to align advocacy as far as what the city needs, we are 100% in support of having those conversations and making sure that we're talking from the same script, because it does matter.
All right, seeing no further speakers, we are going to accept your presentation for information at this time, and then administration is going to take it back, and then it'll come back to council for decision at some point in the future. So very near future. So thank you very much for being here and for your excellent presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, Ann.
Next on the council agenda at item 9.2 is Community Assisted Response Team, commonly referred to as CARE. Request for funding. Lyndon Grunwald, Executive Director of Canadian Mental Health Association, is with us to provide us a presentation and the request for funding. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to have the support for this program that we've seen. We have some great care team members with us. The other ones I think are on duty right now, so they're not able to join us. The idea around a care team is something that the Medicine Hat Police Service had been investigating for a number of years in how do we respond to first response on mental health calls that may not be appropriate for a police response. And so the idea was to investigate what's happening in other areas where it's been successful, and then they bring that here, and that's where we've come from. The information that they brought to Medicine Hat was successfully delivered over a number of decades in Portland, and they wanted to bring that model to Medicine Hat, essentially to the Canadian market. There's actually a few pilot programs that are happening simultaneously across Canada. There's one in Victoria, there's us, there's one in Toronto. Very different models for the size of city, but the intent is to have on the ground first response for mental health crisis before it escalates into something where the police service would need to come in to de-escalate something. And so the incredible need that we've seen over the last year and over the last few years coming out of COVID and during COVID is that we are seeing an increase in mental health calls and in mental health emergencies. Medicine Hat is not immune to that. We've seen that in some of the unfortunate circumstances that have been happening in our community just recently. And so the idea of the success of the care team is to help people in those initial stages where it's very possible to provide help. The police service is excellent at their jobs, but they need to be focused on police matters. And a lot of the calls that they were getting previously were mental health calls that were sometimes outside of their wheelhouse of expertise. And so bringing in someone like a healthcare professional into that area is what the care team specializes in. We have a PAC team already in place, and so those are mental health professional and a police officer going in together because it is higher risk. Maybe there's warrants involved in that person's life, maybe there's weapons involved in the initial call to 911. That's not where the care team is sent. The care team is sent to low-risk calls and also welfare checks. And so if there's escalation, yes, police are involved, but what we found over the last year is that there's many, many opportunities to de-escalate a situation or provide help in a situation so the police service is not required to provide their expertise in the circumstance. So the, what button am I pushing? So this was the initial, this was the initial heat map. Oh, so the 911, this was the anticipated calls for 911 based on the anticipated level of calls from the study. And so the need for intoxicated welfare checks and mental health calls is high back in 2021, and that hasn't decreased in 2022. But what we've seen is there's a difference of response that's able to be in place because of the care team. The next slide is what the anticipated heat map or the concentration of calls would have been when they started the pilot program. There's an idea that most of the problems with mental health are happening in downtown, in the flats, with the vulnerable population of Medicine Hat. And what we've found over the last year is that 60% of calls are actually in residential areas, in Ross Glen, in Taylor, in Crescent Heights. People that you would maybe walk past on the street and not think that there was a mental health emergency that happened in their home the night before, and that the care team was there for 3 hours to de-escalate a situation, whatever that may be. And so a lot of the stats that they collect is not just the number of calls, but it's also the length of time at a call, because they could be hours helping an individual work through their mental health emergency, and why it's important to not have police officers that are tied up for hours at a time at a call that is better helped through a mental health professional. And so the numbers that we had, and this is just the first 9 months of the pilot program. And so we have both the number of calls at the top, but we also have the time for calls, which is also important for us. If we take a teenager who's experiencing a mental health emergency or even suicide ideation to the emergency room, they're not going to sit there for 3 hours to wait their turn. They're going to leave and they're going to have an escalation of their mental health crisis. They will stay if the care team is sitting with them and helping them through that. And so we found a number of individuals that were directly benefited by them being there. And I actually was with my daughter who broke her ankle in basketball, and the care team came in and they sat with an individual the entire time I was there and helped them until it was time for them to see a doctor. And so we see that there's value in the type of service that would be very difficult for the police service to continue to do those types of calls, because if that person leaves and then it escalates in their mental health crisis, then of course they're, it becomes a bigger problem for both the police service or the health service. So for our ask, we are asking for the initial money that we got from the province was $451,000 for the year. We are asking for $450,000 from the City of Medicine Hat per year. And what that does is it covers our team structure. So we have 2 teams that are on in 4-day rotations. They work 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. And that allows them to be on call when we've determined the most number of calls to 911 dispatch have happened for mental health emergencies. We are on target for that spending in the current year. And other CMHAs around the province are interested in what happens in Medicine Hat, so they can bring their CMHA in their community that structure to help them. And so we've recently been awarded a provincial award, the Community Justice Award, for our work with the care team. Incredibly proud of the fact that they're already recognized as a significant contributor to the mental health supports in Medicine Hat area, or City of Medicine Hat. So I'm grateful to have been able to present to you on the need that we have in our community of continuing with the on-the-ground first response for mental health calls. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGrogan.
Thank you. Thanks for that presentation. I'm just curious about the funding. So you received a one-time grant from the Alberta government, is that correct?
Yes, from the Civil Society Fund.
Okay.
That was, the budget was outlined both based on their HR requirements and setting up the team requirements, the vehicle requirements to operate directly out of the CMHA office.
I'm just curious if you have tried to get continued funding from the Alberta government. Has there been any attempts to write grants, or is there any other attempts to get funding other than to come to the municipality? So just curious what efforts have been made and what the results have been.
Yeah, so we went back to the Civil Society Fund to see if there could be extensions made to the initial ask, which there's not, unfortunately. We also have discussions with our division office in Edmonton for CMHA, because they are interested in having this program in other cities, especially the cities that are our size, where this model has worked very well. And so the initial plan of the budget was to have the 1-year pilot and then get funding from the city to continue the work at the municipal level, and then see how it can be expanded across the province. So the CMHA division partners are interested in the outcome of what happens here, so they can see, because we're kind of still in that pilot program of how do we then move on from the pilot to see the support from the municipality. How does the province step up to make that successful in one jurisdiction so it can then be moved and copied in another jurisdiction? So I think the initial ask with the city is the first step that the partners at the province are interested in finding out the level of interest that you have, the benefits that the care team has to the city versus taking the care team away and having it go back to the previous model. And I think that the responsibility for the majority of the funding should be with the municipality, simply because the benefit is mostly here. But the province, I think, does have a responsibility both for us in this area, but also for expanding it. We've already had requests for expansion into Redcliffe. Now, because Redcliffe is our CMP, it's not as easy to just drive across the highway as it would be for us to do that type of a service. On the heat map, there was a red spot in Redcliffe, but that's because the people that were served gave their address of Redcliffe, not because the care team went into Redcliffe. So there's definitely interest in expanding, and then figuring out the model, the percentages maybe, is what we're doing right now.
Okay, just
Go ahead.
Just a quick comment and then a question, and I'll quit badgering you. So first off, I don't want my questions to seem that I don't support this work. I've been part of this kind of initiatives in the past, and I totally support it. As far as the efforts, you mentioned in your last comments that there's other communities that are delivering the same program that sounds like they've been a while. Have they tapped into the Alberta government? It seems to me this, so I guess where I'm getting at, and you can tell by my questions, this seems to be where's the Alberta government right now in assisting with this funding? Because I know it was on their radar during their election campaign, all this issue. So I guess I'm just wondering, what are other communities doing? And thank you for what you're doing right now.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. There is a small care team that's been started in Calgary. They've actually come to us and asked how we do it, and the benefits and disadvantages that we've seen already. But we're the first in the province to have this on the ground, and so I don't think the province knows the best way to move forward. My concern with some of the provincial funding that we've seen in the past 8 months is that it's very specific to certain types of mental health rather than the general overall type of mental health support that CMHA offers. But this is a very specific type of mental health support that benefits the community. And so the CMHA division office, that's why they're interested to see how the funding request comes from the city, how it goes, so that they can then approach other other areas of the provincial government for long-term funding. Because it's going to be, I see this as the model going forward that works really well. So then we just need to figure out how do we then fund it.
Councillor Hyder?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Through the chair. Hi, Lyndon. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. I just had some questions here. When you talk about low risks, because I don't work in your world, what does that mean if the care team's called out to low risk?
The easiest definition is no warrants and no weapons.
Okay.
So these are family situations. These are an individual is having maybe a crisis on the street. The higher risk situations are our welfare checks. Someone sleeping in the ATM lobby of a bank downtown.
Okay.
And when we wake them up to have a discussion with them, we're not exactly sure how they're going to react.
Right.
And so those types of situations are where we can have a conversation with the person immediately from a contact, and there's not going to be an escalation. Now, we do have training with the police service that if it does escalate, that there are safety checks in place with the police radio that we carry, and that the police are also monitoring, so they're aware of where the care team is and very supportive of the care team. And so they want to make sure that they're safe, because their initial job is the mental health care of that person. There's been very few actual escalations that are required police intervention.
Okay.
Most of them are actually de-escalation to, having a resolution. Now, the care team also will drive people to the hospital or drive them to the root cellar, or have them in the back of the vehicle to warm up on a winter's night. And so often those services are available to
that we are just helping the person in their crisis to get to where they need to be, the next help that they need. We don't carry a caseload. We don't follow up with them for the next week to see how things are going. We're very partner focused on other services that are in Medicine Hat. But that initial contact is important to us to make, and that's why we have two of them, to make sure that there's safety for our members.
Okay, Mayor Clark, okay, thank you. So you have obviously you work very closely with the Medicine Hat Police Service, obviously. So the qualifications, I'm just curious of your care team crew, like are they social workers or are they recovery? I just would, like, what is their qualifications?
Yeah, they are social workers.
Okay.
There's some of them have addiction counseling in their background.
Great.
And some of them are in school, whether it's a psychology program, whether
okay.
it's a social work program. And we're always partnering people that are, senior with intermediate and junior. We have the four full-time staff, and we have about 7 casual team members to fill in when those people are not available for shifts. And so we have very seasoned people to people that are coming up and learning in the field.
Okay.
But we always make sure that there's always a seasoned person with someone who's learning. But they're very familiar with the Medicine Hat landscape of mental health. They know a lot of the same people that they were dealing with in their past jobs are now, again, helping them through this time as well. We're a small enough community where that happens.
Right.
But they're mental health professionals, and that is important for us.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's difficult, especially in the pilot program, to find staffing for it because of that, and people have to pay their bills and with their families. But the team that we have is excellent, and they've received a lot of accolades on what they do and how they interact with the community and how they interact with the police service and other partners that they work with.
So the 451,000 is operational costs, okay? And last year, it would have been funded by the province.
Yeah.
And this year, you're coming to the city first. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Robbins.
Thank you, and through the chair, Mr. Grunwald, hello. I also had some funding questions because when I reviewed what is being done, I wondered if it doesn't fit under the FCSS umbrella in some way, or the Community Council on Homelessness funding that comes from the federal government. Do you have any thoughts about those two funding streams or umbrellas you might fit this program under?
Definitely the FCSS in the various grants that are available to the organization. Most grants that we apply for, like the Care Team pilot, are here's money for a new thing, and then after that money is exhausted or the time is exhausted, then it's the responsibility of the organization to come up with fundraising dollars or some other type of funding to cover that. And so we have never actually considered the homelessness avenue from the federal government for this type of initiative. As we're saying, 60% of the people that we are helping through this program are housed. There are a population that are not. So that could be another avenue of operations, but the granting is obviously always an option that we have. It is quite competitive right now with the economy for all the organizations to want funding for really good things that they're doing. And we're in line with everybody else.
Councilor Knodel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. Thank you for being here and sharing the efforts that you've contributed to Medicine Hat with us. The one thing that I noticed between you and your team and Mr. Carolan and his team is innovation in regards to the way that we care for our community and meeting a need that I think is truly, like, whether it's the air ambulance or the care team, that these are really essential elements of care for people right now. It seems to me that there's a bit of an intersection between emergency services and healthcare in what you do. And I work in a high school setting where we see these mental health emergencies more often than you'd really hope. And I know that it's definitely not, when a person is going through something like this, having a police officer arrive, if they know how to handle the situation, is fine. But there's a barrier when somebody's in their police attire. For a lot of people, it can be traumatizing in itself. So I think the work that you do, just arriving as in human natural form, is very valuable. I recognize, and I'm sure you recognize, just along with anybody asking the city for money, that there's finite resources, and as life gets more expensive for everyone, we have to try and meet the needs of every group. So I'm eager to see what kind of problem solving we can do as a council to take care of both, any organization that's doing quality, responsible, caring work like your group. What happens if you're not funded?
If we're not funded at all, then the vehicle goes back to the dealership and the staff go and look for other jobs. It's something that we've seen in the past with our charity, but with other organizations as well, where you have an amazing program that gets funded for a year or two and then doesn't, and then it evaporates. Sometimes it can be resurrected and come back, and sometimes it can't. But we feel with this one, because of the impact of the mental health emergency that we're seeing across Canada, that there has to be a way forward to keep it in place, whatever that means, because it's so vital to what's happening on the ground, like you said, in the schools. Our very first call was to a young person that was going through a mental health crisis, and suicide was being considered. And so it's important, because the teachers didn't know what to do in the situation. The police were not yet on scene, and we were there, and we helped the person de-escalate to the point where they were interacting with us and fine. And that, first call that we had was a testament on the importance that we're literally saving lives because of the important work that we're doing. And then how that works going forward, whatever the calculations and formulas that are used. We have concerns with the government of Alberta and their focus on certain areas of mental health, because we haven't had the support necessarily of the provincial government in some of our mental health initiatives as a CMHA as a whole. AHS has been very supportive in some of our individual programs, especially our suicide prevention, which has been very essential to Medicine Hat in the last few months. And so we are just really wanting to find the balance of providing an essential service, but also understanding that, we have budgets and everyone has needs. Currently, we are in Strong Towns consultations, and so we know that the city is interested in being fiscally responsible with the money that we all have as taxpayers to support the city and the needs that we have. We just feel that this is a really important need in our community, and if it's not being met, that's when higher costs happen in the healthcare, because they have to go to the next level of care, which is always more. So.
Through the chair to Mr. Grunwald, thank you for the work that you do. This is something that makes me kind of emotional to talk about, because I know how important it is, and I see it. I have lived experience. I have watched family go through what you're discussing, and I see students all the time go through it. So please know that it's important to me, and I really hope we can find a way to support you.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Thank you very much, and through the chair, to Mr. Grunwald. So I have a deep appreciation for the Whitebird Clinic model of mental health call response, which is what this is. And I fully support this program, and I would like to see it continue. And I think mental health calls are our response are a clear case of responsibility that has fallen onto police that is not actually a role of policing in the community. And I think culturally, there's a recognition that that needs to change, and so I'm glad that this program exists because I think it's addressing that issue. My concern as a city councillor, though, is that we are potentially taking on funding and delivery of a program, not delivery, but funding so that you can deliver a program that falls under the purview of the provincial government, since this is a mental health issue, which is a jurisdiction of the provincial government. And I'm wondering if you've fully exhausted all provincial funding opportunities for this program, as well as making this presentation to our MLAs.
I have not exhausted all my avenues with the provincial government. As stated earlier, it's a little bit cyclical in that way. When I was talking to provincial representatives and our CMHA office, they were interested in the response from the municipality before they engaged in conversation for funding. And so I believe that it's a shared initiative, that it should be a joint effort, because we want to make sure that it's supporting the residents of Medicine Hat, but it's also something that is healthcare wise, but it's also something we want to have across the province. So I do think the provincial government has responsibilities in that area, and what that means, I'm not sure exactly, because like I said, with the Strong Towns initiative, I'm not sure the appetite that City Hall has for funding new initiatives that are really good for the city, but there's lots of really good things for the city. So that's obviously my next step in the journey of continuing this option that we have. And if changes need to be made on the staffing or the hours that we have operations, or the number of teams that we have, it would be difficult to provide the same level of care. But in my opinion, and I don't know if any are you are aware, 988 is coming this fall across Canada, which is the 911 version for mental health calls. I think Medicine Hat is positioned to respond to an increased number of calls, because I still think that there are people that will not call 911 on mental health calls. Whether they know about the care team or not, that stigma may be that maybe uniformed police officers are going to show up. I had an interesting experience when I went to start talking about this rollout at the police station, and there's a long boardroom table there, and there's uniformed police officers all on the other side welcoming us in, and I did feel a little nervous sitting down there, and I didn't have anything to hide. I hadn't done anything wrong, but it's just that stigma that that the authority is here, even though they're all great people. And so I think that there's not been a decrease in the number of mental health emergencies that are happening, and we need to be well positioned for what's coming, in my opinion, in the future for either 988 or other things that are going to help the citizens of Medicine Hat in their mental health journey. And I think that the care team has proven that they could be that team that helps out.
Councillor Sharps?
Hi, Lyndon, and through the chair, I've got a few questions, and they might be a little bit more pointed than the rest. So let's start with going back to Councillor Van Dyke's question that you haven't exhausted all the options. I want to really get some clarity on this. Have we exhausted any of the options? Has there been any applications to the province at all?
Just the ones that have been denied.
Okay, so for this particular program, not in general, but for this particular program for the care team, there's been applications that have been submitted and denied?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess I would like us to consider something other than just funding. Is we have a chief of staff up there that has great contacts with the provincial government. We should be utilizing him to assist with this and put some pressure on. And the reason I'm saying that is there's one taxpayer. That's all, one taxpayer, and they pay federal tax, they pay provincial tax, and they pay municipal tax. So the province is responsible for this, and they I know there's lots of funding with this, and I'm disappointed to hear that you've been refused on it, but I think that we need to try again, because I do know that the funding is out there, and I know this care team is exceptional. I know that they've been incredibly successful. The accolades are huge. The province would be remiss not to fund this. So I think we are in a position to put some political pressure on them. I'm not keen with this being a municipally funded program, and here's why. One of the things you said initially right at the beginning was, when you set up this program, or when we set, so I don't know who all was involved, and it doesn't matter. When you set up this program, initially you took the funding from the province with an understanding that you were going to come to the city. Did the city know that?
Yeah, I believe so. I wasn't involved in those discussions, but that was always the next step of, after the 6 months or 9 months of the pilot program, was to present the care team to council and ask for long-term funding.
Okay. I think I would like some further clarification on that if we could, City Manager. So I also have an ask right now, and I'm going to direct to the City Manager, Mayor Clark. If we could maybe have our Chief of Staff assist with some of those applications that have been denied before we consider this. I just think that we really need to exhaust that option first.
Through the chair, I did have my button on, and it's way back when Councillor McGrogan was speaking. So my question was very similar to Councillor Sharp's, and it was, when the program was set up and you received the initial funding, was the city aware, was it specifically outlined in the grant statement that the city would be expected to fund? Those are kind of questions that I was wondering. Was it just the expectation of the province, or was it specifically, and you said the city was aware, or you believed they were aware? Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I can go back to the wording and the proposals just to make sure,
Okay.
but that was my understanding.
Thank you. But certainly, but I do think that we haven't exhausted everything, and I think that we could help internally first to see if there are other programs, and as Councillor Van Dyke alluded to as well, to see if there are other funding mechanisms. We all know that they have mandates in the provincial government. They have mandate letters. This is a program that's very high on their list, and it's hitting all of their, it's ticking all their boxes, so they should be supporting it. So we will work internally with the group and come back to council and let council know, if
Did
that's
you
the
have
wish.
follow-ups, Councillor Sharp?
Just a quick follow-up statement that we're not all traumatized by the men in blue. So they're sitting over there. Just want them to know that we appreciate you and we're not all traumatized, other than when I look in my rearview mirror.
That's right.
Councillor Hirsch?
There's always a danger of almost being last to kind of make some comments, so I'm not going to reinvent the wheel, but I do want to put a disclaimer out there for anyone that comes to us with funding. You know, obviously, any type of initiative that gets done in the community that has any kind of strength whatsoever is well respected. I appreciate everyone's efforts, and I think we will give the due diligence that it requires. You know, as a little bit of a trivia question, I bet you if you polled this audience and you asked who's the registered social worker on this council, and it's actually me, if you can believe it. I think it's probably long since gone. But I worked for a nonprofit organization that ran foster homes, and we got pilot projects. We got pilot funding. And I always, unfortunately, got a little bit of a distaste in my mouth because there was great initiatives and piloted for 1 year by the government and then just left abandoned, quite frankly. And I always called it the bait and ditch, unfortunately. So I'm kind of reiterating, and maybe I suggest the idea that's already been raised, a couple things. But my question, I've got a couple questions for you. I always had to do progress reports to the funders. So, and quite frankly, almost a summation at the end of the pilot project. So was that done? Because I'm hearing your comments saying the value that you bring, this is an absolute, almost must-have project. And I'm wondering what the feedback, as you did your reports back to government of Alberta, what their feedback was to almost, quite frankly, and what you're saying to me is that they turned in the back on this initiative. So if it's, the value's there, then I guess I just wonder aloud, like, where are we on that? And what was the feedback as you made your interim reports back to the province?
Thank you. We have sent in interim reports. We just submitted one about a month ago to them on our success stories and our progress on our funding and that type of thing. We haven't had any feedback from them besides we're not funding it beyond the 1 year from that department. So the appetite that the government has at this point is that we haven't been successful, but I know that it's only one area that we've been focusing on. The chief of police has reached out and said he's got contacts in other departments. CMHA division is very strong with provincial contacts in other departments as well. So there are other areas that we are already planning on approaching for funding because the department that provided the initial funding is not, I don't know that they're not impressed with the work that's been done, but don't have any appetite for extending the contract.
So I guess that just leads me to support kind of what I'm hearing around the horseshoe in terms of looking for advocacy or something. And here you mentioned appetite, and I'll give you a little bit an unfortunate story, and you might be completely oblivious to this, and I'm sorry, but I think it's well known that the government, and we've had Managing Director Eager come to us and indicate that there's movement already underway to cut provincial funding to municipalities by 25% going forward. They're measuring and doing indexing to how much they provide. So the more success, the revenues that they get in, we get kind of only a percentage of that. So it's almost indexed. So we're not even guaranteed funding going forward. So, and I do feel like the stretching of the municipal boundaries and responsibilities are not commensurate with the revenue that we're taking in, and the burden there thusly falls on the municipal taxpayer, when really, we already talked about, you can walk upstairs and you won't say any health door, Minister of Health on any door. So I absolutely almost humbly support the idea that we look at our Chief of Staff to assist. We look at any type of provincial funding advocacy that we can do. We just have some really recently minted MLAs that would love to carry a flag for us, and I think this might be one of them. You know, again, I appreciate, again, I can't reiterate enough, I think the program that you offer is fantastic. I just think from a funding, an absence of funding, and kind of a deflection to the municipality, I think is really in poor taste in regards to our partners that we consider at the provincial government. So I don't know if it's already been moved, but I don't know if there's any other speakers, so, Ms. Chair.
I think there are no other speakers, but I think in terms of a motion, City Manager Mitchell already
You got
committed
it.
to reach out. So
Okay.
was there something else that you were looking for? The Chief of Staff, I think, would be included in that.
Certainly, or any piece of administration that can lend some support on that, that's great. Thank you.
The City Clerk thinks we should have a motion, so I would entertain a motion.
So I will move that administration work with CMHC Care Program to look at any type of funding advocacy we can do for other levels of government.
Second.
All right, discussion. Seeing none, we'll vote on the motion.
Thank you. Yep. Have you got my contact information? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And it's unanimous. I guess it didn't go up on the screen there. So with that, we'll move on to item 10.1, Audit Committee. Councillor Hirsch, as Chair of Audit Committee, do you have any highlights for the group?
I do, Mayor Clark, thank you. Just pleased to report that via the audit, we did have our annual report indicating so far so good when it comes to our budget. Quite frankly, there's been indication and already been covered by external media reports in terms of how we're doing in our utilities. We're finding ourselves in a very enviable position where we stand financially in regards to the revenue. Hopefully, this is something that we will see towards the year end as we get to a final year-end audit. So all is good. I do want to reiterate that we did have the conversation in the audit meeting regarding kind of the majority of the revenue, quite frankly, that is driving to the utilities is the sales of the grid. So we do market, as everyone knows, our rates are compared to the 5 other, I believe it is, outstanding market in terms of how we arrive on rates. But again, where we're finding is that our success lies in the sales to the grid. And if there's any other questions, I can certainly respond to them. Thank you.
Okay, so we have the meeting minutes of Audit Committee dated June 6, 2023.
Is that me? Sorry. I move that council receive the minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on June 6, 2023 as presented.
Second.
Discussion. Seeing no speakers. Oh, Councillor Dunemanowski.
Your worship, just one item regarding the investment portfolio. Obviously, last year was a trying time, and there's some movement, I guess, afoot in this current fiscal year for improvements. Just wondering any high-level kind of treasury commentary regarding the last cycle and moving now midway into the current year. We see the benchmark being missed slightly, but just some overall predictions or projections in that regard.
Managing Director Egert.
All right, through the chair, Councillor Dumanowski, it's a high level with respect to the investment portfolio. We currently have a market value of $687 million. The performance through April, and that's sort of a 4-month performance, has been 3.23%, and we measure that against the appropriate benchmark. The benchmark was 4.38, so it's slightly lagging. Keep in mind that's a very short term, and we measure on a longer period, 1, 3, 5 year, just to see performance. So the anticipation for the rest of the year, based on what we're seeing, is that we should be hitting the benchmark, if not exceeding it, to the end of the year. I will remind the council that our investment strategy is diversified both on asset class and geography. We employ top-tier investment managers in all our external investments. And with respect to volatility, because the market is going up and down, we take the long-term view with our investments. In other words, we don't time the market. We also look at regulation and policy, and so we're in line with both regulation, provincial, in terms of what we can invest in, and city policy.
Thank you.
I have a question about the triannual management report. It is an information item, but since it's in the minutes, I'm going to ask it now. I want to preface my questions with I do care about our finances. I value getting updates on things that are pertinent to council and help us to make decisions. But in that line of thinking, just want to make sure we're always thinking about value for money. So we get these 3 times a year, and it looks like a lot of work went into this. And so I'm just wondering, what would the staff hours that go into preparing each of the triannual reports be?
Great question, Mayor Clark. I know it's a lot of time. It does happen 3 times a year. Year end would be the most work. That period of time takes anywhere from middle of January to middle of February, pretty much full time for our accounting crew. For each triannual, I would say, in the area of 3 to 4 weeks, and that's a combination of working with the operations to understand where the differences and variances are, ensuring that the numbers make sense overall, reporting it out to administration committee, and getting feedback, and then preparing for the audit committee as well. So it is a lot of work. I will say we do have a project currently started that we're looking at that whole process. And that was really a comment that came from the last audit committee is there a way that we can look at this differently? And the way both we prepare it, the way we analyze it. And so we are just started that, looking at what that could look like, and really to ensure that we're spending the right time in the right areas for the preparation of this report. When you look at sort of the responsibility of audit committee and the three prongs, one is, of course, appointment and performance evaluation of our independent auditor. The second one is internal control and risk environment assessment. But the third one is to ensure the oversight of our internal financial reporting system to ensure that we're getting the information that we need, that it's timely, that it's accurate, and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll look forward to that coming. I'm just going to drill down a little more. So how many staff do you think would work on it? So if we're talking about 3 to 4 months, 3 to 4 weeks, 3 times a year, how many staff are kind of working on that at a given time?
Yeah, and I don't have the exact numbers, Mayor Clark. I do know that it's a cross-organizational effort. We have managers and directors in each of the operations, of course, which not only prepare the budget, but manage their budget based on actual. So I don't have the number in front of me now, but I could get a number. I would say it's a lot of people as part of that process.
Thank you. City Manager Mitchell, are you responding to my questions? Okay, well, I'm going to go to Councillor Robbins then. Go ahead.
Thank you, and through the chair. So what I actually wanted to say was, when we went through the budget process, understanding what each department's budget was and what the business plans were, was a process for me personally, I can only speak for myself, for me personally to learn. And so when I went through it this time, I understood the numbers because I've seen them and I recognize them, and I had input into what they were going to be. So I was in a much better place than, like, I had climbed that hill of understanding, maybe is the way I want to say it. I'm not on the other side, I'm still working on it, but I certainly thought that the business plan updates in each section were really helpful for me to understand where each department was. And so, well, it took a little bit of reading to get there. I'm really grateful I did. I think all that information, while it takes a very long time to put together, anyone from the public could read this information and be in the same place that I am in terms of understanding the city's budget. So I did appreciate it. And I will tell you that, so when I go through all of I use Adobe for everything, so I put sticky notes in as I go so I can, electronic sticky notes, that is. So I have a whole bunch of them here that I had questions, and so I would be like, why is there a cost? I don't get this, just like things to trigger. And then as soon as I put the sticky note on, I'd go down to the notes and the answer was there. So I don't actually have any questions today because it was all contained within the notes. Now I appreciate that, as Mayor Clark says, it takes a tremendous amount of time to put together, and I'll leave it with city manager to figure out the best way to do that. And the audit committee will work on that. But for me, for my understanding of what's happening, for my understanding of where the budget is that we approved, where it's gone, and each of the line items with the notes, it was very helpful to me. So I just want to thank all of those people who worked on it.
City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you, through the chair. And just for my understanding, maybe Managing Director can answer this, the triannual report, and then, like, it's my responsibility as city manager under my managing directors to bring forward quarterly reports. It's a little bit different with the audit committee, and I just want to make sure, and I'm glad we're looking at the process, that we're not duplicating work. So the triannual reports, my question, I guess, is, to Mayor Clark's point, is it in additional to quarterly reports or separate from? If you could kind of clarify that for me. Thank you.
All right, through Mayor Clark to City Manager Mitchell. We currently have our financial reporting every 4 months. So we call it a triannual reporting. So we have one in April, and that would be then in August and then in December. So I know that there's other types of reporting that we have for performance reporting within the organization. That performance reporting is done on a quarterly basis. So there may be a bit of timing difference on there, but it should be consistent with the type of information that you're getting.
So not necessarily duplication? No. Okay, thank you. And I do agree with Councillor Robbins. The audit committee, we should look at that to make sure that it's best practice and that we're meeting the needs of council. Thank you.
Councillor Hirsch.
Just wanted to appreciate the comments that were raised in regards to audit committee, and I think it's important to just clarify a couple things. So this final product, actually what you see on a regular basis, or actually 3 times a year on the quarterly or the triannual, is actually an evolution. We've seen council packages from triannual coming at excess of 500 pages, and we've able to water it down. The reality is that you as a councillor have the ability to look at the general area and then have the ability to drill down at your reading pleasure if you wish. So at the end of the day, I think the idea was that we wanted to give the information, and what I sincerely appreciate is the notes that are given. From a budgetary standpoint, if you're on par with budget, really there's nothing really to talk about. But the fact that when you're not on par or not on budget, the notes that say why we're in ahead of the game when it comes to budget, or quite frankly, if we're not, is always in there. So I appreciate that all the time. For me as a reader, it's, really at the end of the day, if we're all on budget, it's not really much of a news story, but when it's the differences, I think I pay attention to. One thing that I think staff and council needs to understand is that, yes, we meet 3 times a year, so every 4 months we meet, but I think it's important for our council understand that staff meet on a monthly basis to state, are we on pace with budget, any adjustments that have to be made, any things that are not budgeted, we should bring forward, obviously. So from a financial monitoring aspect, administration, I'm comforted in the fact that on a monthly basis, they're on it. I guess the argument would be it could be even weekly in terms of some of the other administration staff that are tasked with it. But and it just so goes that on a quarterly or triannually basis, we meet and have that discussion. So it is a summation of monthly meetings that are done by staff. So that's in addition to the preparation of the triannual. So there is a lot of attention that goes towards it. If there's no other questions, Madam Chair, okay, then I'll just put up I might have a notice of motion or a motion if case be.
We have a motion on the table for the accepting the minutes. Okay. Councillor Dumanowski and then Councillor McGrogan.
Your Worship, good conversation. The conversation about the reporting and the rigor, time, effort, energy, and financial implications directly tied to that exercise. I think it goes without saying we are a mid-sized city, but we have a large, multifaceted portfolio and service environment. And when we talk about in some of the conversations earlier about market volatility and then we have, and you relate that to the revenue targets, the need to stay and refresh those numbers regularly is critical. Years ago, we used to do quarterly reports, and then over the evolution, it became a triannual reporting exercise. I'm not suggesting by any means through my comments to suggest that staff are just doing what they need to do, but they are. The fact of the matter is, again, with financial accountability and the awards that we win year after year, predicated largely on our ability to have a fresh and relative and timely update on our budget line. So, and then I'll end it by saying, when we think about some of the considerations this evening by HALO and CART and others, we wouldn't be able to do that or in any meaningful way or even bring consideration to it, because these aren't small requests, and our ability to understand our state of revenue balance sheet and against our expenditures, and again, the volatilities that interplay and all that is critical. So I don't think anyone's disagreeing. I just want for the public out there, the swarms of people that watch this program every Monday night, we are doing what we have to do, and being transparent and being accountable to the public purse is paramount.
Councillor McGrogan.
Thank you. And through the chair, I have a comment to make, and then I'm going to try to take a left turn, but if I'm off in an area that I shouldn't be, I don't mind being told that. So first off, these reports are always excellent. And again, like Councillor Robbins, it's a lot of information, but once you start kind of figuring out how it all pulls together and each business report lines and stuff, it actually makes a lot of sense, and I really appreciate the work that goes into this as well. So specifically, and this is where I could take a left turn that I shouldn't be, but I want to go to slide 9 of the CFO report, and it has to do with, if I can't get into the granular stuff on this, please stop me, but operating performance, utilities, and energy.
Just before you go, can you say the page number of the package?
183.
Thank you very much.
So it's page 183. So like everybody else, I'm getting tons of calls from really good citizens and stakeholders in relation to the perception of record profits by our utilities. Very well laid out in this report, but as we lay them out, the guy sitting in his living room is going, wow, it's tons of money, and we're in the middle right now of a utility hike of almost double from where we were locked in, and I think no matter how we try to message this, it comes across like and I've read the messages. They're great messages by the staff to the people that have the questions. But the bottom line is we're making record utilities. We're asking people to make a choice that they don't want to make. They just want to say, tell me how much I pay for my utility bills, and I'll pay it. And maybe at the end of a few months, we'll, kind of look at it again. And so I guess I'm going down that rabbit hole and saying, if it's just me, then I'm fine with just not going any further with this. But I think we need a more simplified approach, and we need, at the end of the day, for these profits that we're making in one area, that our stakeholders are actually seeing in some tangible way the benefit. We can say, oh, we're going to build facilities someday, and look at our, the money we have in our investment portfolio. It's over $700 million. All that is wonderful. But I really think we're confusing our owners of this utility by these record profits and what's going to be double electric rates for some people. And I just wonder if there's more clarity that we could have around how one equates to the other, because I don't think it's reaching the average citizen in Medicine Hat. They're not wanting to make a choice about fixed or variable, and they're stressed about it. They're stressed about how much their utilities are going to go up. And we're reporting record profits, which is great. But I think the owner of this utility needs to have it a little clearer laid out. So I just want to open that up. I want to say it. And if it's just me, I'll stop talking. Thank you.
Yeah, we have discussed that. I think it would be very helpful for us to articulate what the benefits to our community are of owning our own utility. First of all, as like a foundational thing. But yeah, I share your concerns and would accept a motion when we are finished dealing with this motion. City Manager Mitchell, your mic is still on, Darren, as well.
Thank you, through the chair. I appreciate the comments, and no, you didn't wander off into areas you shouldn't have, Councillor McGrogan. I appreciate that, but we have certainly heard it very loud and clear too from the customers. And I know council has, and council has brought it to our attention. We've had some internal discussions about the models and the confusion with the model and the changes, but also to Mayor Clark's point, what is the Medicine Hat advantage with owning our utility? And I do think if council can articulate the clarity of what you'd like to see, that we can certainly bring it back, because I do think it's very timely right now. We're all hearing about it and we need to look at it. Thank you.
Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, through the chair. I guess I'm in full support of discussing what Andy had brought forward. So if we have to wait till after, we can do that.
Yeah, let's see if we get a motion on the table.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
thank you.
sounds good.
Councillor Sharps.
Actually, I'll wait till Councillor McGrogan puts a motion. I love the left turn, so.
Councillor Hirsch.
Thanks, Your Worship. I don't know if I think I mentioned I wanted to do a notice of motion, or a motion. So, so in keeping, and it's funny, I appreciate, no, you're not alone, Councillor McGrogan. In fact, I had sent an email the day of admin committee to council, basically looking for some support, and I will prepare to make a formal motion right now, you know, based on the fact that, you know, we do not believe, and everyone you talk to is indicating that we're not going to see record profits for very long. And the involvement of renewable resources, aka wind and solar, that now can go onto the grid, take priority. We will see a dramatic revenue reduction, and as I indicated, and I specifically indicated, we pay market rates as hatters. But the reality is our real revenue comes from what we supply to the grid. So if that ability to get that revenue is diminished, so will our record profits, quite frankly. So that said, I just watched today our Premier of Alberta indicate that they're going to do an extension of the gas rebate for the next 6 months. I don't want to necessarily really with my motion limit it in terms of what I'm looking for. I actually want to throw options on the table. So
Can we, just before you make it, we need to vote on this motion that's already on the
certainly,
table.
thank you.
Okay, so we will vote on the motion to accept the minutes. That's not this vote. I'm sure it'll be the same. That's unanimous. Councillor Hirsch.
So your time, at this time, Your Worship, I request and move that administration to review one-off options, and I say that specifically, to explore possible solutions to the shareholders of this utility in terms of the value that they perceive in terms of their ownership of this utility. So hopefully we get some support for that.
I'll second that.
Yeah, well, let's get it up. I'm not sure I understood what the motion was.
So again, I try to want to make this a little bit more big picture thinking, but what I will, and I didn't say it, but what I will say then, to make it specific, is I'll request administration to review one-off options to explore possible rebates and or other solutions to the shareholders, present shareholders of this utility.
Can I second it, or can I suggest a second piece to that? A friendly amendment? I think it relates to the fixed versus variable. I think there needs to be a look at that as well. I will second your motion with a friendly amendment to also include the examination of fixed versus variable and other potential options. Jessica, try to put that in a motion.
It's Rondi.
I guess that's kind of what I wanted to have a little bit, and I guess specifically we should give that sort of direction, and I appreciate it, and I will accept it as a friendly amendment.
All right, we'll just wait to get it up on the screen. Counselor Dumanowski.
Your worship, while that is being put up on the screen, I don't think anyone around the table would disagree with the idea of having staff do a review. I guess big picture, and I guess trying to understand the motion as in the context of a rebate, which to me, and maybe I'm misunderstanding it, translates into a one-time or some kind of a incremental rebate or response versus a more comprehensive rate review. I know that was a conversation we had a long time ago. I'm not sure where that process has gone exactly. I think there was some confusion around council and the interpretive value of what that meant, but I certainly remember being there at the onset. I don't know which committee it was, but one of the conversations was around exactly that. How do we manage? How do we forecast? How do we create algorithms that benefit the utility and keep it whole, but at the same time create opportunities for us to be flexible and nimble when it comes to times like we're experiencing right now. We're all hearing it and we're all feeling it, and certainly, as has been indicated with record revenues, it's hard to reconcile those two things for everyone, quite frankly. So, to me, a more comprehensive rate review, long-term strategy still has to be on the table. We need to get our terms straight and get with that, because to me, that's going to be the longer term solution, and that's going to be the mechanism upon which we can respond much more nimbly. And I think that's going to be overall the best strategy to solve an environment that, said it earlier, has a lot of volatility. Right now we're in record revenues. Who knows after this current year, it's expected to be good again, where things are going to go. Councillor Hirsch and I have been here long enough to remember the years where we were in the opposite direction. So it's finding that mechanism that benefits everyone. And part of that as well is the broader utility, not just electric, which is probably at the forefront of most people's consideration right now. And then in a few months, it'll be gas. So I appreciate the motion before us, and I'd like us to kind of adjunct to that, add on a little bit of a push for our final review on our rates, which we've been waiting for. Thank you.
And just part of that review was supposed to be an articulation of what the value of owning our own utility was. So would you be including that in?
I don't want to fetter what's before us. I'm just adding that as a reminder. And certainly I think we all recall that conversation, and I know it's still kind of parked somewhere at committee or as an outstanding thing, and I'm not blaming staff at all. I think, if anything, the last conversation we had around the table is our interpretation of what a rate review even meant, never mind what would constitute a rate review, but we need to get that straight. So looks like our city manager has all the answers here.
Councillor Van Dyke. Oh, okay.
Through the chair. Councillor Dumanowski, I do agree, and I think one of the challenges with the rate review was a matter of clarity. So I would like to have that conversation, but maybe outside of this, and I do think we need to have that maybe possibly at a committee level if that's agreed to. Thank you.
Or we could do a motion after this motion is completed. Councillor Van Dyke.
Thank you, and through the chair. I fully understand the concerns in the community around this, or maybe concerns isn't the correct word, but people are looking at windfall profits and also seeing at the same time having to change to kind of a new contract or utility rate system that they're unfamiliar with. It's new to Medicine Hat, but not new to the province, but change is difficult when we've had a system in place for a really long time. I would caution looking at any kind of significant rebates or anything now mid-year when As has been discussed, this is a very volatile market. There's a lot of energy coming online in short order in the province that will probably drive prices down, and we see pool prices now sometimes very low at different times. And I kind of liken it to one year when my husband was in, if you'll indulge me in a short story, one year my husband was in college and I was working, and we got an income tax return that we had not anticipated. And it was, my first fleeting thought was we should go on a holiday. But I knew that, there would be additional college expenses coming in the fall, and that the responsible thing to do would be to put that money in the bank, to wait to see what would happen and how much we would need it for costs that we knew were coming. And so I'd be hesitant to do something like this mid-year until we kind of have a year-end tally. And also the fact that we have not budgeted, in our last budget that we approved, we didn't put money aside for any kind of energy transition or CCUS, that we had kind of acknowledged that those things would come forward as needed, and they haven't really been accounted for yet. So just a word of caution on that point.
Councillor McGrogan.
Thank you. I'm wondering, I'm just hearing the great comments around, being cautious, and I totally get it. I'm wondering if we could double friendly this up, and if we took out the one-off, sorry about the bad humor, but if we took one off and just left that with staff, no, I'm good with that then. I guess the point to this is there could be options that are different than the one-off. I guess my philosophy, I'll just finish and then I'm done, is we all eat together, we all starve together, and this is kind of one of those scenarios, and I respect that. And we have to make sure that we have enough food in the freezer, and that we have enough for the table, and that we're looking after everybody. So I'll leave those comments, and I trust in our staff and the process. Thank you.
Councillor Knodel.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. I have two questions. The first is likely for Managing Director Egert, but I'm just curious, how much money do we transfer yearly from the energy side of things, from our energy business, to balance our current budget? Is there a single line? It's probably more complicated than that, but.
Through the chair, Councillor Knodel, so for 2023, it's $9 million from reserves. So that was as we presented to council for approval. So say it in other words, we have identified revenues, except for another $9 million, which we filled with payments from reserves. We have a plan on reducing that over the next few years through various revenue sources, including investment income. So for 2023, it's $9 million.
Clarifying question. So just to make it really clear, that $9 million is a deficit we are currently in for the municipal side, and we are substituting it out from Comco profits to completely fill that void.
So through the chair, Councillor Knodel, the $9 million comes from our financial reserves, of which part of that is from the Comco dividends.
And do you mind, Mayor Clerk? Can I just keep going? Can you tell me exactly what contribution Comco will be making to that $9 million deficit?
So it's a pooled fund, our financial reserve. So we have, I'll say recently, large part of that is from Comco. There's other dividends from land and other utilities as well. And so that all, and previous dividends as well, even from previous years from all three of those. So every year it's different. It's a mixture, but recently the large majority of that would be from Comco.
Okay, and the reason why I'm asking this question is just because if we've got record profits, we are still relying on those profits, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, to offset our municipal budget. It's not just profits and well, I suppose that's the definition of a profit is after the fact, after expenses, but we are still transferring some of those after expenses back to the municipal side, is that correct?
Yeah, so I'll back up a step just to maybe lay out the process here. When we presented the budget and approved the budget, we required $9 million payment from the reserves. And so we're still on track to be requiring that. We managed the rest of the budget, as we talked about through Councillor Hirsch, just in terms of executing and are we on track with our expenses and other revenues as well. But yes, that $9 million is required and will be paid from the financial reserves for 2023. I will also add, when we look at the dividend or the distributable cash from utilities and from Comco business, we do have earmarked certain things, future capital that we require and future obligations that we need to pay. And some of those or many of those aren't reflected in the financial statements, but we know we need to replace, we know we need to clean up, we know we need to spend money in the future. And we also know that the volatility of the electric industry, that the profits that we're seeing in 2023 won't continue forever.
Thank you. And then my second question is likely for Managing Director Pancoast. I know I had follow-ups, but Managing Director Pancoast, in regards to, and through the chair, in regards to a rate review as per Councillor Dumanowski's question, does that go against the concept of staying at market value? Like, are those two things in contrast? And can you remind us why we are staying with, or why we chose to go with a market value rather than a modified rate?
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Knodel. In terms of rate review, I think that can be a very broad question, so that's why we have sought clarity of council in the past. And perhaps to add a bit of framework to what I mean by looking for clarity, the complexity and the timeline for how big the scope would be could mean days to several months. So the simplest approach would be through a briefing note, we could bring forward what potential relief options could be on a short-term basis for residents of the City of Medicine Hat. We have done that in the past, and that's typically through Managing Director Egert's office, leveraging funds previously received through dividends from Comco. The second in complexity would be revisiting the bylaw of the utility rate design itself. We could certainly simplify, we could revisit the specific design of the products that exist. That would require a bylaw revisit. And the next level of complexity is revisiting what's the business model in terms of fair market value or not. That is a fundamental philosophy that we've held on to for a variety of reasons. One of them, for instance, the more closely we align to the competitive approach of any other legal entity in our position, the less likely we would see issues with our regulators, the less likely we would face constraints from that perspective. Plus, we have a breadth of customers that expand beyond the City of Medicine Hat, so we need to be mindful of equal treatment across all our customers and the implications there. Then, of course, there's the question of, is this a scope that extends beyond electricity? So the breadth and depth and timeline and complexity involved in defining what scope is being asked to be revisited is pretty significant. If it is a relief question, we can revisit that. Dennis's team has done a remarkable job of looking at that in the past and could update that fairly quickly. Or it could take several months to try to pull that work together. So that's where the clarity of scope has been asked, if that answers your question, Councillor Knodel.
Okay, I know Councillor Hirsch is on next, but there's a couple of new speakers. Councillor Sharp, you haven't spoken on this one.
Thank you. And through the chair, I just have a couple of really quick questions. There are rates, and through city manager to managing director Pankos. I believe you and I had a conversation before, and you educated me that the rates that we have internally to the city is still, we have to offer the same rates outside of the city. Is that correct?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Sharps, for each defined customer class, we have to have equal treatment across all those customers. That includes customers within the city as well as any customers outside the city.
Thank you. I think, I'm just going to make a comment that I think sometimes we need to communicate that better. Some of the emails I'm getting right now is, we're the stakeholder. Why do we not get a discount on the rate? And there's only so many hundred emails you can reply back to. So if we could maybe educate and, give communication better. But in alignment with additional communication, Managing Director Niegert made a very good point about we have future obligations that we use Comco money for. Again, I think that stays around here, and I don't think we do a great job of saying, hey, this is going to support this, this, and this, because I think they just think the money's sitting there going to the heritage savings, and you actually aren't planning, and we know you are. So I think we could just communicate, let our citizens know what's happening with it. I think information just goes a long way. So does that give clarity? And I guess my last question is, I'm hearing that from city manager that this is clear, this motion, but I'm kind of hearing from managing director Pankos, it might not be clear. So before this goes back and somebody in 3 weeks says, hey, you guys weren't clear, can we get clarity?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Sharps. If the motion stands like it is here, this piece to me is clear. The other piece that I think we referred back to committee that Councillor Dumanowski was speaking to, that is another piece that I think we have to delve into, the utility and what is the Medicine Hat advantage. We certainly need clarity around that, and Managing Director Pancoast is right. We've asked for clarity, and I think that's something that we need to work out through the committee level and bring back to council. But as far as I'm concerned right now, this is clear. Thank you.
Okay, I'm next. I have one comment. I think that the second half after the and or is incredibly broad. So I'm a little concerned that that's a big piece of work that I'm not sure I understand what all goes into that or whether we need to focus. I don't disagree with the idea. It's just it's a big question that I know a lot of work went into in the previous iteration. So I want to kind of make sure we have a sense of how much work and time would have to go into something like that. And secondly, Councillor Sharps already mentioned the Heritage Savings Reserve. So in the wisdom of the previous council and affirmed again by this council, the Heritage Reserve was set up to provide an advantage from our utilities that would be long-lasting and would basically a certain percentage of our free cash flow every year goes into the Heritage Savings Reserve. Then all we can spend from that reserve is the interest, and that interest goes from the Heritage Savings Reserve as an endowment to the municipal side so that it's positively impacting our taxpayers. So my question to you, probably unfair, Managing Director Egert, is given that we have this surplus, what does that look like for our Heritage Savings Reserve endowment? I think we had, I want to say, $5 million coming in 2020, starting in 2025, but I might have that wrong because we added additional money. So if just the 20% of our free cash flow at the end of the fiscal year goes in, that's first question. And then is there an ability to, like we did last year, increase that amount by resolution, and how might that affect the endowment that comes into the municipal side, impacting our potential deficit and tax rates?
So thank you for the question. Our forecast for the Heritage Saving Reserve at the end of 2022, the balance was $159 million. The estimated free cash flow and the 20% is an additional $35 million during the year. And so that would end for the end of the year for 2023 the Heritage Fund would be approximately 195 million. So the second question, Mayor Clark, yes, there is an option, of course, for council to, I'll say, override the formula, and we did that last year, and certainly that's something we could do this year as well. The interest rate, overall, over the investment cycle is 5.5%. And of course, with the Heritage Fund, we would protect that for inflation. So we always earmark 2%, and of course, that may be low. So for planning purposes, approximately 3.5% of interest would be the endowment.
Okay. Could you do the math for us? So when are we projecting to have what amount of endowment given just the free cash flow, 20% of free cash flow we'll have at the end of this year?
Yeah, so that's for 2024, that's when the endowment is intended to start. That budget has yet to be presented to council, and so that still needs to be presented and approved by council, the endowment coming out of the Heritage Fund. For 2023, it's a building year, it's not a endowment year.
Okay, and is there an amount of money that we can add to make it, so if it's another building year, we projected 5 million in 2025, with this, it would be more than 5 million in 2025. I feel like the answer is yes, but.
So yes, we have more money in the Heritage Fund, which would result in a larger endowment. So as a rough number, Mayor Clark, just calculate 3.5% on any additional funds. That would be the incremental endowment.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Hirsch, Councillor Robbins, you're a first-time speaker on this?
I am, thank you, and through the chair, I'm not going to support the motion. We discussed this at length in December. We received lengthy presentations about the different fixed rate programs, what it would mean, that we knew that the community would have some response to it. We discussed increasing the fair entry program, so there would be that ability for people who couldn't pay. The community warmth program exists. I'm very cognizant of that discussion we had in December, that there are more customers to our electric company than just citizens of Medicine Hat. This will not last. History tells us that. Oil prices go up, they go down, gas prices go up and go down, and so does electricity, and we've learned lots about that through that. I feel like an auditor sometimes at Energy. I certainly learned all that in the first, dozen or so meetings I attended of the Energy Group to understand this better. I feel like, having heard and seen in our previous presentations that $9 million is what gets transferred over, a big portion of that comes because we do operate a company. We're a municipality that does that. Many municipalities don't have that option. And so what do when they have a $9 million deficit? They tax you more. And I feel like perhaps Managing Director Eggert told us at one time that each 1% of tax increase is $800,000. So if I do my math, $9 million is 11.25% tax increase. So the fact that the citizens of Medicine Hat are stakeholders in this large company is a benefit in many different ways. And for me as a parent, a benefit for the future as well, in the sort of endowment that I was asked recently what did I think was the sort of highlight of my time here so far, and certainly the transfer of that money into heritage funds was a highlight for me for the future citizens of Medicine Hat. Because when this electricity rate crashes, which it will, we know that we put that money away and we're good stewards of it. So anyway, my point is, I voted for this in December and I stand by my vote then, so I will not be agreeing to the resolution now.
Councillor Hirsch.
Lots to unpack. So I was very specific in terms of my wording, and I apologize for those that, when I shook my head on some of the other friendly amendments. So my intention is to actually revisit to staff in terms of stuff that we've done in the past. So the same mechanism can be certainly entertained. One of the things that I had indicated prior in my earlier comments is that, yes, I'm very comfortable, as I indicated, when we have our triannual, it's always just that we're on pace. So back to Councillor Van Dyke's point in terms of looking at it from year end, I'm completely fine with looking at it. In fact, I would prefer, because then that's actual. That's something we can kind of hang our hat on. Right now, we don't know what happens towards the end of the year, so I'm completely fine with that. I think the timing of the request is to address the concerns out in the community that I'm hearing time and time again. So I think from a staffing point of view, I didn't put a time specific on here in terms of when we're gonna do it. I think it makes sense from a financial sense to have it, you know, at year end and maybe look at the options then. And part of the motion was to, quite frankly, buffer the anxiety that we all experience going on fixed and variable, et cetera. And what I'm hoping for potential options, quite frankly, might be an educational piece that I've been asking last time we talked about it. Yes, we're a utility provider, so we could say, hey, fixed or floating, what are you gonna do? Or we could say, hey, we're a municipality as well, that we feel like we need to explain that a little bit more. And I'm not saying, hey, you know, give precise direction, because I don't have that crystal ball, no different than anyone else. But we could cite resources where a ratepayer can go to find what the curve looks like, the strip. We've talked about that before, and maybe some educational piece would be definitely the case. I've heard communication time and time again in here. So I appreciate the fact that there is financial concern, so thank you, and I'm actually gobsmacked because we're almost diametrically here. Usually I'm the fiscal hawk, but what I've done is I've looked at it from a point of view of both historically, we've been here for financially fit, accelerated financially fit, and here we are, quite frankly, in a time where we don't have to use those words anymore. We're at a $9 million deficit, which we can manage, quite frankly, which was a scarier version when we were at $23, $27 million, where we had that savings account that, quite frankly, if we kept on our pace, we would have been at zero. So I know that. I appreciate kind of where we are coming from. I think a lot of people, and I'll call that taxpayers and the citizens of Medicine Hat, lots of heavy lifting in the last, let's call it 5 to 7 years. And when I see, you know, some pretty big profits going on, inherently I feel people are saying, okay, where am I on that? And quite frankly, I'm obviously completely aware of the $9 million that we do that. I think it bears restating that that's, in fact, a bit of an advantage. We have that to the point of 11 point, and Councillor Robbins did the math. There was one of a time that it was upwards of $43 million back in the day when things were really chugging along, and you do the math on that tax savings. The unfortunate thing is when that stopped happening and the golden goose kind of went a little bit tarnished, we were in that unenviable position of finding to bridge the gap and to look at ways that we can more balance the budget. So my motion is not without just a knee jerk. It's something that I've considered and thought about many different times. And that's what the state of the email to you when we had the audit meeting. The larger discussion on the utility by itself, I will actually champion the fact that we stick at fair market value, only because of what some of the comments that the managing director indicated. So, you know, I don't have a problem having the discussion back in the day, but it inevitably, I don't want to go to the trap that we did back even 20, 25 years ago when our gas, we were selling at, I think gas at the time was almost $15 a gig, and we were doing $2.35 to our residents. So you want to talk about an absolute subsidy, it actually almost contributed to the problems that we ran into in the last 5 years. So again, I don't want to revisit that. don't have a problem having the discussion, but it's something that I think from a market value, and that's why I asked for a one-off and kind of was at the point of not accepting looking at it from a longevity point of view, because again, as I stated in my earlier comments, right now, we're in that position. I don't know if anyone know this, but it wasn't that long ago that the utility actually lost money. So back to the comments that were made in terms of watching fiscal, I have no problems doing that, and that's why I'm asking for the one-off right now. So hopefully that makes sense. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on the motion. And that passes. Moving on to item 10.2, Public Services Committee. Councillor Robbins, as Chair of Public Services Committee, do you have any highlights for us?
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and through the chair, nothing that we're not going to discuss later, except we received the Medicine Hat Public Library Annual Report. And so we had the Chief Librarian and Chair of the Library Board attend, and that is contained within the package, so you can see what's happening at the library. I do sit on that board on behalf of the city, so I thought I'd highlight the work that's being done there.
All right, moving on to item 10.2.2, meeting minutes, June 12th, 2023. Oh, sorry, Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you. Mayor Clark, I'm going to recuse myself as I work for an organization that is listed in the potential grant recipients.
Thank you.
The grant recommendations are contained within the minutes, so. So I move that council receives the minutes of the Public Services Committee meeting held on June 12, 2023 as presented for the record.
I'll second that.
Discussion? Seeing no speakers, we'll vote on the motion. Councillor there we go. That is unanimous. Moving on to item 10.2.3, Family and Community Support Services, which is commonly referred to as FCSS grant. Recommendations.
So once again, I move that council approve the recommendation to award the two-year 2024-2025 Family and Community Support Services contract funding as presented. The total is $670,000.
Second.
Discussion on this motion. Councillor Robbins.
Yeah, I just wanted to give some context background to the FCSS funding. The FCSS funding was open. The model is 80% from the province, 20% from the municipality. We had this amount that we were able to grant if council approves. The Community Vibrancy Board, once again, had a committee that they formed and reviewed all of the grant applications, scored them against a matrix, and then met and discussed them further. So we did have a representative of Community Vibrancy Board attend the meeting at Public Services so we could ask questions. That's not always sort of reflected in the minutes because there's lots of questions and discussion, but that's where the vetting happened, and then Public Services was able to ask questions as well. So just wanted to sort of give the background, and they are two-year funding as opposed to one-year funding grant cycle.
Councillor Hirsch.
Thanks, Your Worship, and it's important, I guess, to the comment that Councillor Robbins just indicated on the two-year funding. I guess I'm just wondering in terms of, I do read, and I just can't help but think about the presentation we just had in terms of pilot projects, and that was a one-year pilot project and then looking for a home. And I look here that Medicine Hat Public School Division, and I have no problem in terms of who the sponsor is or whatever, but I note that we got a cultural liaison worker for being offered, that's going to be a 2-year project. But after the 2 years that goes by, we've got an individual, and that could be a contract position, I'm presuming. But is there a situation, and maybe this is the question, where some of these requests become, I'll call it hardcore funding, that they're baked in all the time? Because I do notice that we always provide Medicine Hat Family Services for sure, and I get the value. And actually, that was some of my comments that I was going to make during the care presentation, that we do contribute quite a few dollars in terms of FCS funding. And then that's my question. So if an organization like CARE comes forward with their application, it's unfortunately going to be weighed against the merits of other like-minded or great initiatives on the go. Is that fair? Like, I'm just wondering about the funding. We don't really hardcore fund, but yet we do have Medicine Hat Family Service there that I know sitting around this table for many, many years, it's always been there. So just understanding the matrix.
Councillor Robbins?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm the one to answer that question, or if perhaps Managing Director Stout, as I do know that some, certainly Medicine Hat Family Service, I used to be the president, so I remember coming here and lobbying for funding years ago. There's different reasons for the funding and the applications. I did ask CARE if they had applied for FCSS funding, because I did feel, based on my understanding of the matrix and the rules, that it would fit into the mandate here. But I'll leave it to Managing Director Stout if the city manager is okay with him answering the question.
Thank you, through the chair, to Councillor Hirsch. Certainly, the matrix is applied, and based on the criteria and the way the grant applications are written, they score. Medicine Hat Family Service continues to score high according to the matrix, and thusly they have been a recipient of fairly steady FCSS funding from the city. Certainly, some of the other ones may come and go, but the same matrix is applied. And to supplement Councillor Robbins' description of the process, the individual members of the subcommittee took all the grant applications home, studied them individually. Then they came together as a subcommittee and reviewed each other's findings so they could land on consensus to make sure they were applying the matrix in a consistent way. And then it received another level of scrutiny with the entire Community Vibrancy Advisory Board. And then certainly on to public services. But the short answer to your question is, I don't know of a more consistent and fair way to apply the matrix for this funding. And the CVAB folks have put in a tremendous amount of effort. And I would say that there's a likelihood that some community user groups are skilled in how they apply for the grant funding.
Okay, just respond. So actually you answered the question, and I appreciate it, because that's exactly kind of what maybe I'm looking for in terms of matrix. And it wasn't that long ago I sat on the Community Foundation, which is a grant funding mechanism, and I spent quite a few hours reviewing applications just like that, and having to weigh great applications is incredibly difficult. So this is not me actually second guessing. It's the fact that it just reiterated, and I appreciate the comment, that any applications that come forward, and if there's one that's going to come in from the CARE group, then it has to be weighed in terms of other demands that we have in the city, and I guess that's what I'm getting at. So thank you for that.
Councillor Robbins?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to share with you, Councillor Hirsch, that, and you've experienced this through Community Foundation, and there's other agencies in our community that do grant funding, and they'll often have an idea that they incubate. And then that when it's successful, it's a successful little chick, they try to find a home for it. And so sometimes that is in the city of Medicine Hat, where that project is so great that it must stay and form part of our little chicken coop here. But other times it's other agencies that will continue that work. And so some of the projects might be in our chicken coop, like Family Services long-term, and some of these are more incubation type programs that may end up with another home somewhere. But I certainly know through the Community Foundation, and I went to their Founders Picnic to learn more about what they were doing, and Medicine Hat Community Housing has funding as well, that sometimes it's just that incubation needed to get a great idea started, and it finds a permanent funding home. I hope that for all of the projects that happen. Sometimes it's us, sometimes not.
Seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on the motion. And that's unanimous. Moving on to item 10.2.4, provincial funding for medical first response. And City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you through the chair. I think Managing Director Stouth, if you wouldn't mind, can give us a little bit of background.
Managing Director Stouth.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the chair, I assume there's going to be a motion made in support of seconding a motion made by the City of Grand Prairie to have the Alberta municipalities receive a resolution, and if it passes, to lobby the provincial government for funding for municipal fire services in Alberta that, as part of the medical first response program, are responding to EMS calls in support of Alberta Health Services EMS. There are about 300 medical first response groups in Alberta, all of those being fire services, whether they're career or volunteer. There is no particular model or method for municipalities to be compensated at this point in time. So what this Grand Prairie resolution does is ask the Alberta municipalities to lobby on behalf of municipalities in support of receipt of some level of compensation from AHS. The ministry has indicated that they're prepared to put a pot of funds, which is unknown in size, forward for compensation to municipalities. And what Grand Prairie is wanting to do is formally have Alberta municipalities lobby on behalf of their members. So that is the nature of the resolution. In Medicine Hat, for your interest, we do respond to about 400 medical first response calls in the city. Those are what we would call high acuity calls. The ranking for medical calls is done on a letter system, Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo, with Alpha being the least severe or lowest acuity calls and Echo being the highest acuity. With our system, we respond to many of the Delta level calls and all of the Echo level calls. And that attributes to about 400 responses per year. So certainly it would be advantageous to receive some level of compensation for that work.
Councillor Robbins.
I just wanted to put the motion on the table so we could discuss it. So I move that council approves seconding the City of Grand Prairie resolution to be presented at the Alberta Municipalities 2023 conference regarding municipal funding for medical first response by fire services in Alberta.
I will second that.
Discussion? Councillor Canoto?
Thanks, Mayor Clark. No, I wanted to just make a comment that during public services, I was curious about what sort of, like, if there was any sort of compensation, like whether that was supplies or anything. And I know Managing Director Stouth said that, and maybe you can remind me, there was a comment made about replenishing of supplies and that was possibly taken care of. Can you remind me if I have that right?
Certainly through the chair to Councillor Knodel, Fire and Emergency Services enjoys an excellent working relationship with our local Alberta Health Services EMS folks and crews. Part of the MFR program is the immediate replenishment of supplies used by fire services in response. And that replenishment is done from the responding ambulance crew. And certainly we've enjoyed that to the extent of supplies that they can replenish. So they are doing that portion.
Thanks, Managing Director Stouth. Yeah, I think it's in my perspective, it makes good sense if we are going to ask the fire service to use their resources to do complementary work to our EMS. Do I have that emergency? Yeah, our EMS. Then we should at least be an advocate or support advocacy in regards to some sort of financial compensation.
Councillor Robbins?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. I did note last year there were quite a few of us who were able to attend the Alberta Municipalities Conference, and it was very interesting because there's communities will say, this is really important to me, and they would find another community who said, this is also very important to me, and they would have someone who would move and someone who would second, and then there would be a vote via a very slick phone app. I remember that. It was really good. So this is an opportunity for Medicine Hat to look at other similar sized cities and say, we have something in common with you. And so I like the advocacy if it is actually important to us. So when I was going through the detailed operating management report, as one does for these meetings, in the fire and emergency services, I'm on page 160. It does detail there the MFR incidents over the course of 2021, 2022, and 2023 to show how often the fire service is being involved in this medical response. And so I'm hoping that with that kind of statistical information, and Grand Prairie must have something very similar, that we'll be able to convince Alberta municipalities to put the weight of their lobbying effort to the government to be successful. So that's sort of the context of what the request is coming out of public services. But coming out of that, I actually had a question for Managing Director Stouth. So I see in the notes, move my glasses here because I'm getting old. Response is achieved with full engine company response to keep engine crews intact and ready to respond to the next emergency. So if there's a cardiac arrest, the whole crew responds in case there's a fire, because you would have to leave there to go to a fire and you don't have time to go back to the fire hall. Am I understanding that that's what that note means?
Through the chair to Councillor Robbins, yes. A tactical decision in how we respond to medical first response was to keep engine crews together. And we have had, I don't know the exact number, I could find that, but we certainly have had incidents where once the EMS crew has arrived and patients stabilized, we have responded right from that location to another incident, be it a fire incident or a motor vehicle response. So that's why we keep those crews together.
All right, seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous. The remainder of the items are for information. Are there any comments or discussion on the items for information? I can't see, but I'm assuming there are none. Speakers list, seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned.